Good evening, committee. I'm Kathleen Mallory, Planning and Sustainability Manager, and I'll be reviewing input recently received from the State of California Department of Housing and Community Development. I also have Amy Sinsheimer with PlaceWorks and Jenny Gastelum, also with PlaceWorks, on the line this evening. I also have Heather Davis, who's the project planner on the housing element, and I'm also joined by Emilio Ramirez, the city's housing director. The goal this evening is to present policy questions for which committee input is needed. The housing element is a required element of the city's general plan. The city's been working on this update since mid-2020. Following our meeting with you, this committee, in April of this year, where we presented the draft housing element, and then to City Council also in April, the draft housing element was submitted to the state for a 60-day review period, which began on May 14th. We recently received a findings letter from the State of California Department of Community Development, or HCD. The findings letter, received on July 13th, identified updates to make the city's final housing element compliant with HCD guidance. The input pertains to minor edits, such as technical clarifications, additional information on existing policies and programs, code modifications to comply with new state law, specifically pertaining to single-room occupancies, congregate care facilities, emergency shelters, and creating ministerial processes for by right projects. Additionally, we received input on sites, which resulted in staff adding additional affordable housing sites. No input is needed at this time regarding those minor edits or those additional sites that are being added. The purpose of this meeting this evening in this report is to focus on the HCD recommended substantial housing element updates or edits, such as new and updated housing programs, and also to receive input on funding for these programs and programs added added as a result of the prior committee meeting. We're requesting committee input for the new and updated programs and those substantial items this evening. The state requires that we adopt the final housing element and all land use and zoning updates to be in place prior to the beginning of the 6th housing element cycle. This adoption has to happen by October 15th of this year. Committee input is requested on the HCD recommended new programs and substantial revisions to existing housing element programs. These program updates are to address recently updated guidelines on affirmatively furthering fair housing, or AFFH, which is a brand new provision in housing element law. Additionally, input is needed on ADU affordability incentive programs to encourage owners to lock in new ADUs as affordable and to justify the allowance of up to 1,000 ADUs towards fulfilling the city's lower income RHNA. This evening, I'll be presenting a series of questions for which I'm seeking committee input. First question, there are a total of 5. Does the committee support the addition of a new program language in existing program 2? The new language pertains to Part E of Program 2, and that pertains to citywide homeowner repair programs, and it's intended to target place-based revitalization efforts in areas of concentrations of poverty, and that's intended to address the state's fair housing law. So the second question pertains to, does the committee support the new affirmatively furthering fair housing program language? That is the addition of the legislative format language in Program 19, and that's intended to address the state's new AFFH requirements. Due to the late guidance from HCD, when they reviewed our draft housing element, is asking for changes to 2 programs to address the AFFH requirements. Their input resulted in expanded language to programs 2 and 19. There are many additions to the program language. Much of what is recommended by HCD, the city is already doing, so that's exciting and encouraging. So the new language required by HCD is expanding and clarifying what we're doing. Examples of some of the additional program language that you'll see pertains to Program 2. Housing Department increasing outreach and promotion of rehabilitation loans and other resources to areas of concentrated poverty to counter the displacement of housing units and people. Program 19 pertains to promoting quality of life infrastructure improvements such as tree canopy and bike lanes in racially or ethnically concentrated areas of poverty in certain areas of the city. And also reviewing the city's density bonus regulations to allow above state density bonus provisions, such as higher density or additional concessions. These would be then focused on racially or ethnically concentrated areas to provide more opportunities for housing. These are AFFH guidance, and that guidance came out in May, right about the time we submitted our draft element. Question 3, does the committee support one or more incentives for homeowners to deed restrict their accessory dwelling unit as affordable to lower income households for 55 years? HCD staff strongly suggests that the city create a program to require deed restriction on some ADUs. The city cannot require affordability deed restrictions on ADUs ministerially allowed by the state, meaning those units that are go through the over-the-counter approval process or that don't require a hearing before the planning commission or council. The city can provide an incentive for owners to deed restrict their ADU by providing funding or allowing more lenient ADU standards than the state permits. The city is already permitting 2 ADUs on a single-family residence. That's typically comprised of a full ADU and a junior ADU. That's allowed by the law right now. The city already complies with the state law, which mandates that we waive the parking for accessory dwelling units within half a mile of a transit line. And the city already complies with the requirements that ADUs be ministerially approved. So, in consultation with the city's housing department and as a result of HCD discussions, staff recommends creating an ADU construction cost assistance and accelerator program. That would cover a portion of the ADU's construction cost, including building permit fees for homeowners willing to offer their ADUs as affordable to lower income units or to lower income persons for 55 years. And that would match lower income households with affordable ADUs. The program would require approximately $140,000 in general fund allocation for the additional housing department staff to work as a liaison to the community development department to monitor construction cost assistance, to verify feasibility of affordable units, to refer qualified tenants, and to ensure tenant case management is provided as necessary, if the tenant was formerly homeless, of course. Funding to offset the ADU construction costs could be secured from the city's in lieu affordable housing fee and other state and federal funding sources allocated to the city for the development of affordable housing. Question 4. Does the committee support allocating financial resources to the above programs? Those programs are listed on this slide. Specifically, we are looking for programs 41 and 42, which would have a fiscal impact to the city. Program 5 would have a policy implication, and I'll talk about that in a moment. As the committee may recall, the committee and council were supportive of including Program 41 and 42 in the draft housing element. Those pertained to farm worker housing and were encouraged by the affordable housing advocacy groups and also in alignment with what the County of Ventura is doing. We committed to adding these programs into our draft housing element, and we would be recommending that we bring forward a program, a funding source in early 2022 for these two programs. Program 41 is a one-time cost, with the remaining programs representing an ongoing budget request. The Program 41 is a study that would be looking at farm worker housing needs in collaboration with the County of Ventura. It will be a one-time cost, with the remaining program representing a budget request. The conclusion of that study would result in potential policy implications to our housing element. Program 42 is a housing trust fund program, and a new funding source would also be needed for that program. That was added in response to community input, and that is the funding and participation in a trust fund program, which would have a budget implication as well. We have been working with the County of Ventura, who has put out these programs, and the precise amount of that cost for those two programs would be known around October of this year. And this is a budget request that we would be bringing. We would be bringing a budget adjustment in the early part of 2022 if the committee is supportive of this. There are other funding needs for future years, and no actions needed, as you can see on this slide right now. There are additional programs which the HCD is recommending, specifically on Program 2 regarding affirmatively furthering fair housing outreach, and then also an ADU accelerator program. Both of those two programs we would not be seeking funding for as part of this fiscal year's budget. The focus for this question pertains to if the committee is supportive of allocating financial resources to those two new programs, and then we would be bringing that forward with a definitive dollar amount in early 2022, and we would know that cost in October roughly this year. Question 5 pertains to the city's lot consolidation program to waive lot merger fees for specific affordable housing sites. This is a program that has previously been in our housing element, and the policy language said consider waiving lot consolidation or parcel assemblage fees. That's basically where there are affordable housing sites that are small sites that could potentially be put together or merged or consolidated to help facilitate construction of affordable housing. HCD reviewed that language, and they said they wanted to strike the word consider, and they wanted support for the city committing to putting money towards a parcel assemblage and lot consolidation program. HCD has indicated that they're seeking targeted city funding for the city for that program, and they were asking for a commitment from the city to facilitate that program. Within our draft housing element, we have identified roughly 17 sites identified within supplement 1 of the housing element, and those would involve consolidation potentially. They're smaller than 0.5 acres, so collectively they could be making very viable, larger affordable housing sites. Therefore, what the proposal would be to do a fee deferral so that affordable housing developers could potentially not have to pay the fee for the lot consolidation. And we have anticipated, based upon roughly 17 sites, over the course of that 8-year planning timeframe, if the council and committee agreed to a policy to waive that lot consolidation fee for those 17 parcels, that would result in a fiscal impact to the city of approximately $74,000 over that 8-year planning timeframe. A few additional affordable housing sites are also proposed to be added, and this is more informational to the committee. Through discussion with different property owners, since we've put out the draft housing element, we've received some interest from property owners. All of these sites we would recommend including And as I mentioned, no committee input's really needed on that right now. This is informational. The first site is 1505 9th Street. It's 0.47 acres. This is a vacant commercially zoned lot surrounded by medium high density residential. It's located along a transit line, and the owner has contacted the city with interest in a multifamily development project. With a density bonus and potentially rezoning to provide for an affordable housing discretionary permit review process, this site could accommodate 21 affordable units. The additional site also, an additional site we're proposing to add as well is at 1225 South Oxnard Boulevard and 1263 South Oxnard Boulevard and 1260 Saviors Road. The total for those parcels is 3.13 acres, or 4 acres in total when we combine it with what we currently have of a site in our housing element, and that's site 1251 South Oxnard Boulevard. Collectively, those 3 parcels I mentioned and what we currently have in our housing element would total roughly 4 acres, which is a nice size affordable housing site. These are contiguous commercial underutilized parcels or lots, and the owner of 1251 South Oxnard Boulevard has listed the 3 additional parcels in the owner's interest survey. As you may recall, we sent a survey out to potential affordable housing sites in the city, inquiring if there was interest in developing, and we received this information back a little bit late in the process, but still early enough to potentially incorporate those parcels into the draft housing element. That property owner for those parcels expressed interest in consolidating the lots and developing with a multifamily residential project. In terms of next steps, through August and September, we'll meet with the housing advocacy groups and advocates and specifically share with them the input we've received from HCD on the new and amended housing element program language and our continued work to address their HCD's input. In September, we'll be taking the final housing element along with our environmental document for the project to the Planning Commission. That would also include the necessary general plan land use map and text amendments, as well as the zoning and map text amendments to be consistent with the final housing element. We do envision October 5th that we would be bringing the final housing element before the City Council along with the environmental document and the necessary rezonings and map land use changes to implement the housing element. No later than October 15th, we would be submitting our final housing element to the state for their certification. Once we submit the final housing element to the state, they have 90 days to review and comment on that document, with our assumption that we've addressed all of their comments in the July 13th letter, and their action would be to send us a certification letter. It is possible that the state could come back after council approves the final housing element and request additional programs, modifications, or adjustments to timing for when we complete certain programs. We also would then present a budget appropriation sometime in 2022 once we receive HCD's 90-day statutory review letter and a comments letter. And at that time, that would be the totality of the budget requests that we would be asking for. At this point, we do know that beginning early next year, we would be asking for some funding, as I mentioned, for those programs, Program 41 and 42. The other programs I've covered this evening, we're not seeking funding for at this time. And again, we don't have the full dollar amount for programs 41 and 42 because it's being collaborated with the County of Ventura, and that would be a number we would know in October, as I mentioned. When we do bring our budget appropriation sometime in early 2022, we anticipate that we'll need additional and new sources of funding for both the Community Development Department and Housing Department. Staff's recommendation is to provide input and a formal vote on the following questions to provide input in response to input we received from HCD. We're looking for committee's feedback on 5 specific questions that were generated as a result of discussion with HCD. The first does the committee support the addition of new program language to Program 2, Part E, to target place-based revitalization efforts in areas of concentrated poverty to address the state fair housing law? The second question, does the committee support the new AFFH program language that was communicated in the report? It's lengthy. There's about 5 or 6 additional components that are in legislative format in attachment C, as well as in the staff report. And that again is added in response to the new AFFH guidance received in May of this year from HCD. The third recommendation and request for committee input is, does the committee support the creation of the new proposed program known as Program 44? It's an accessory dwelling unit accelerator program for deed restricting units for a 55-year period. And again, no funding is needed at this time for this program. This program will begin in 2022-2023. The fourth recommendation is, does the committee support allocating financial resources for fiscal years 2021, 2022 for Program 41 and 42 that I've covered with you this evening? And that would be for beginning in roughly early 2022, we would have that number, the dollar amount. And also, is there support for the lot merger or lot consolidation program? Question 5, is there support for that program to waive the lot merger fee for specific affordable housing sites over the 8-year planning cycle for those sites identified in Supplement 1? This concludes my presentation. I have a number of parties available to answer questions that the committee may have. Thank you.